5 US cities are losing home value right now, and most of the people living there don't even realize it yet. This isn't a crash you'll see on the news. There's no dramatic headline, no stock market style crashing down. It's quieter than that. Prices sliding a little every month, homes sitting on the market longer, sellers slowly lowering their asking price until buyers finally show up. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 5 cities are seeing this happen right now and why. Let's get into it. City number 1, Austin, Texas. We covered Austin in an earlier video as a place wealthy buyers were rushing into. Now, a few years later, the story has flipped. During the pandemic years, Austin saw one of the fastest price increases of any city in the country. Buyers moved in from California and other high-cost states. Bidding wars became common, and prices climbed far above what local incomes could normally support. That kind of rapid growth rarely lasts forever. Once that wave of buyers slowed down, builders had already responded to the demand by constructing a large number of new homes and apartments. Now, there's more housing available than there are buyers actively looking, and that shift in supply and demand is pushing prices down in many parts of the city. Homeowners who bought at the peak a few years ago are now seeing their homes worth less than what they paid, and some are choosing to sell at a loss rather than wait for prices to recover, which only adds more downward pressure to the market. This kind of correction tends to feed on itself. Once a few sellers accept a lower price, it becomes the new comparison point for every other home in the neighborhood, which pulls the whole area's values down a little further. It's a slow process, but it adds up over time, especially in neighborhoods where a lot of homes were built or bought around the same period. There's also a psychological piece to this that's easy to overlook. Buyers who watched prices climb for years often expect that pattern to continue, and sellers who bought near the top tend to hold out for a price closer to what the market was doing a few years ago, rather than what it's actually doing today. That gap between what sellers hope for and what buyers are actually willing to pay is part of why homes are sitting on the market longer than they used to, even before any price cut happens. Cape Coral, Florida. Cape Coral became one of the hottest housing markets in Florida during the pandemic, and it's now becoming one of the clearest examples of that growth reversing. A huge number of new homes were built here in a short period of time, aimed at buyers relocating from other states. But rising home insurance costs, which we covered in a previous video, have made owning a home here significantly more expensive than buyers originally expected. When insurance premiums double or triple, it changes the entire math of owning a home, even if the mortgage payment itself hasn't changed. Some buyers who could technically afford the home itself can no longer afford the total cost once insurance is added in, and that's pushing potential buyers away from the market. At the same time, a large number of investment properties bought during the boom are now being listed for sale, adding even more supply to a market that already has more homes than buyers. This combination of higher costs and increased supply is a big part of why prices here are sliding. For buyers who are relying on renting the property out to cover the cost of ownership, rising insurance premiums cut directly into that plan, making some of these homes far less profitable as investments than they were originally expected to be. That's pushed some owners to sell simply to stop the bleeding, rather than continuing to hold on to a property that's costing them more each year than it's earning. There's also a knock-on effect for buyers who are still interested in the area. Even someone who can comfortably afford the mortgage might walk away from a deal once they see the actual insurance quote, especially if that quote has doubled from what a similar home cost to insure just a couple of years earlier. That kind of sticker shock is removing a meaningful slice of otherwise qualified buyers from the market, which only adds to the slowdown. City number 3, San Francisco, California. San Francisco tells a different story than Austin or Cape Coral, but the result is similar. For years, San Francisco had some of the highest home prices in the entire country, driven largely by the technology industry and the high salaries that came with it. But changes in how and where people work have reduced the need for employees to live or near the city, and a number of companies have reduced their office space or relocated parts of their workforce elsewhere. Downtown areas in particular have struggled, with commercial vacancies affecting the broader neighborhood and making some areas less desirable to live in than they used to be. When a city's downtown weakens, it often affects nearby residential prices as well. Homeowners in San Francisco are now seeing prices that, in some cases, are lower than they were several years ago, which is unusual for a city that spent decades seeing prices only go up. This shift has been especially noticeable in condominiums and downtown adjacent neighborhoods. Part of what makes this stand out is how unusual it is historically. San Francisco was one of the most reliable markets in the country for decades, which means a lot of current owners bought under the assumption that prices simply don't go down here. Adjusting to a market that behaves differently than expected has been a difficult shift for a lot of longtime residents. There's a wider effect, too. As some remote workers realized they no longer needed to live in San Francisco to keep their job, a portion of them chose to relocate to cheaper cities entirely, taking their high income with them. That's a different dynamic than most housing slowdowns, where the buyers are still around but simply pull back temporarily. Here, some of the buyer pool didn't just pause, it left the city altogether, which is a slower kind of pressure on prices, but one that doesn't reverse itself as quickly once the underlying jobs and workers are gone. City number 4. New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans is dealing with a combination of problems that together are putting real pressure on home prices. We already covered Louisiana's insurance crisis in a previous video, and New Orleans is at the center of it. Rising insurance costs, in some cases becoming difficult to obtain at all, have made home ownership significantly more expensive here than the mortgage payment alone would suggest. On top of insurance, New Orleans faces ongoing concerns about flooding and infrastructure, which affect how buyers evaluate the long-term value of a property. Some buyers are simply choosing other cities where these risks are lower, even if it means paying more for the home itself. The result is a housing market where homes are taking longer to sell, and sellers are having to lower their prices to attract buyers who might otherwise choose a different city entirely. For longtime homeowners, this can be a difficult adjustment after years of assuming their home would only increase in value. This is also affecting how younger buyers think about the city. Some who grew up in New Orleans and would otherwise want to stay are instead choosing to buy homes elsewhere, simply because the combined cost of a mortgage, insurance, and ongoing maintenance no longer makes sense compared to other cities offering similar jobs and a lower overall cost of living. Local real estate agents have described a market where properties that would have received multiple offers within days a decade ago now sit for months, even in historically desirable neighborhoods. Sellers who need to move for a job or a life change often don't have the luxury of waiting for the right buyer, which pushes some of them to accept lower offers just to close the deal and move forward. City number 5. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix rounds out our list, and it shares some of the same story as Austin. Phoenix saw enormous population growth over the past several years, with buyers moving in from California and other high-cost states looking for more affordable housing. Builders responded by constructing large numbers of new homes across the metro area, particularly in newer suburbs on the edges of the city. Once that wave of incoming buyers slowed down, the city was left with a large amount of new housing supply and a smaller pool of buyers to fill it. This kind of oversupply tends to put downward pressure on prices, especially in the newer developments that were built specifically to capture that earlier demand. Phoenix also faces rising concerns about water availability in the region, which has started to factor into how some buyers evaluate long-term property value, particularly in newer developments further from the city center. While this isn't the main driver of falling prices, it adds another layer of hesitation for buyers considering a long-term purchase. Builders in the area have started adjusting too, offering incentives like covering closing costs or lowering prices directly on new construction just to keep sales moving. When new homes get discounted like this, it puts pressure on existing homeowners nearby to lower their own asking price to stay competitive, which spreads the slowdown across the wider market rather than keeping it contained to new developments alone. The pace of new construction is a big part of why Phoenix stands out compared to older, more established cities. When a metro area adds tens of thousands of new homes in just a few years, it doesn't take a huge drop in buyer demand to tip the balance from a seller's market into a buyer's market. Even a modest slowdown in people moving to the area can leave builders and existing homeowners competing for the same shrinking pool of buyers. These 5 cities all got here in different ways, but the pattern underneath is similar. Rapid price growth, followed by rising costs, oversupply, or new risks buyers didn't fully account for the first time around. If you found this useful, subscribe for more breakdowns on real estate, insurance, and where money is moving across America. Let us know in the comments if you've noticed this happening where you live. See you in the next one.